Well, hello, everybody. Bob Harris here, senior editor, footballdiehards.com. Time for the Wednesday night on the hot seat, we call it. Our live stream, very similar to the Saturday live streams, but we're going to do more guests, and we have a great guest tonight. But first, before we jump into the guest thing, just a couple newsy items. The Baltimore Ravens talked about Lamar Jackson today and said nothing. Did say Eric DeCosta, the GM, mentioned that they're open to drafting quarterback in the first round if that's where the value is. I don't know if that's the ideal plan, but their minds are open. They're willing to think things through. I think the bigger story today is Breece Hall. There's a report in the New York Post saying the Jets believe Breece Hall is going to be ready for the start of the season. That seems a little optimistic. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. Seems a little optimistic there, but we'll find out. It's something to watch, right? I mean, it'll be 11 full months or close to 11 months. September, he injured his knee in October, so that seemed a little optimistic based on what we saw from players like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards last year. But certainly open to it. People are drafting like it. We're going to talk a little more about the draft positions of some of these players that we've been discussing. Big story has been Austin Eckler. News made on the program I'd appeared on today, except the news was made yesterday. Michael Fabiano had Austin Eckler on, and he basically said the Chargers not giving him the money he's after was like a punch in the face. And, he realizes he's going to be a Charger this year, barring some kind of trade, and I don't think the trade's going to happen. Also, he's not going to get paid, so he might as well get used to it. I'm sorry he's a running back. I'm sure he's sorry he's a running back now as well, but that's where we're at. So we'll see how that goes for him. Just a reminder as people are coming in, just kind of trying to set the table a little bit. See if I can moderate this sound in the background. Maybe I can't. Jumping into this, we're going to look at some best ball values today. I know most of you are probably drafting, or I know many of you who come to this room are drafting on a regular basis. If you are, we'll have some information for you. If you're not, we'll have some information for you. Not just necessarily that you need to be drafting these players, but kind of get a feel for what ADP is and where people are drafting. Also, if you're not a subscriber to the YouTube page, please subscribe to the YouTube page. Do that now. Subscribe button, notification bell, hit the like button if you're here and you like what you're hearing. It's fantastic. If you don't like it, you can dislike it, but give us a little feedback. If you have comments, questions, etc., as always, we're here for those. We'll work those in throughout the course of the program. But we have on the community tab of the YouTube page, we have a poll up, and we're trying to get a little more activity there. So we have a PPR versus standard poll. I'm not sure if I'm interested to see how it plays out, right? Like I feel like everyone's playing PPR because I like to play PPR, but there are still people obviously out there playing in standard scoring leagues. So we'd like to hear what the preference is, and then we'll break that down a little more in the future and get some other polls up there so we can kind of find out what you're into. It's always good to know what you're up to. And by us, I mean me, Bob Harris, Emo Cadlick, all of us at footballdiehards.com. If you want to go there now, you can go and subscribe early. The early bird subscription will get you a 15% discount if you use the promo code DieHards. Apologies for being distracted. I have a lot going on here right now, more than I need. So go to footballdiehards.com and use the promo code DieHards to get a 15% discount. And before I screw anything else up, let's just jump in and bring my man Eric Ramos in. You all know him from the interwebs and from footballdiehards.com and from the Football Diehards program on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. You know him from from all his work online, the Pros with Joe's, which is where I met him, a great charitable outfit. He works for Dr. Roto, regular contributor at Football Diehards, at Green Screens, Get Green Screens, where you're coming off the huge part of your year with that business, the Final Four or the Fantastic Four, the March Madness. I don't know. I quit watching when Arizona lost. Eric Ramos here, everybody. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me on. That was quite the intro.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you. I know the time is valuable for everybody. And look, I know you're out there in the best ball rooms. I wanted to do some best ball talk this week, and so I know you've been drafting with me. You, me, Jamie, Dempsey, a bunch of us have been in a number of these drafts. Royal Slade has been in some drafts in the comments in the chat with us there. He's in. Hello, Jay. Thanks for coming in. I think you're doing the front yard fantasy game. Are you on? Are you scheduled for tomorrow?
I am. Yeah, I'm on doing tiers tomorrow with the front yard guys.
I was on Monday doing Jeopardy. Big win for me.
Hey.
I don't want to say I'm undefeated on that, but I do okay. Just JR16, I'm getting digs. So we got some comments already rolling in, Eric. So a couple things that, I wanted to touch on in particular is, we're drafting everyone in best ball. Everybody we're drafting in the first round, all these first round picks, we're drafting players at their ceiling, right? And we know the possible outcomes there. Jonathan Taylor showed us exactly what can happen. And with, when you have those high expectations and you invest in these players. So I want to do a little confidence check with you and kind of kick it back and forth with some of these overall first round picks. I think the guy I've seen go the most and the current number one in ADP at Best Ball 10s is Justin Jefferson. And, I'm pretty confident that over the course of the season, he's going to be really good. I also think back to late last season, there were teams that shut him down, including the Packers. He's got a good quarterback, good system, second year in this system. What do you think about Justin Jefferson? Like, you're not getting him if you wait too long past number one overall. But where's your confidence level at on him delivering the goods?
Yeah, it's extremely high for me, right? I mean, he finished the year as wide receiver 1 overall, right? For me, the durability and the dependability of a wide receiver producing over the course of an entire season is a much higher likelihood than it is for running back. So definitely like going with wide receiver first overall. And honestly, there were a couple of times where Jefferson was shut down, down the stretch run last season. But specifically, if you look at the sample of the year from the time that the Vikings acquired TJ Hockenson, Jefferson went absolutely bananas. His ADOT went up, his contested catch rate went up, his target share went up. Like he was very much so a huge beneficiary of TJ Hockenson being added to this team, even though Hockenson himself was still very busy in that offense. So I think a full season of that extrapolated out over 17 games, actually somehow Justin Jefferson has some upside relative to what he did last year, which is crazy to say out loud.
Yeah, I was going to say TJ Hockenson, also a great beneficiary of that. And there was a point, and I want to say it was probably weeks 14, 15, and 16. Those two were tied for the most targets in the NFL with 37 apiece. So, I mean, that's not nothing, right? That's pretty noteworthy numbers. We'll see what they're doing, too, in terms of the passing game, Eric, or the rushing game, because still a lot of mystery around Dalvin Cook. We're going to talk about him a little bit before the evening is over. But it's kind of interesting to see how this offense will play out. Are you still pretty confident in TJ Hockenson? I've been drafting him maybe as the second tight end for me off the board. How confident are you in him?
Yeah, I project him to finish right around 2. Depending on the updates to my model, he's either 2 or 3 pretty consistently. The thing for me with Hockenson is you're really having to pay for him at cost, right? You're not getting much value on him, so I'm not finding myself with a ton of him quite yet, but he projects out for another fantastic season.
Right, I feel like that's why I want to talk about these first round picks. I mean, I think all these guys, you need them to play at their ceiling to return the value, but you're not getting them anywhere else. And there's other players that are going to give you that value, and that's where you can start making the adjustments. Like, do I want to draft a Hockenson at price, or do I want to take more of a value play? But Christian McCaffrey is right there after Justin Jefferson. Eric, I do not pay attention to injury issues. I don't care. Everyone's going to get hurt. I'm not going to worry about Christian McCaffrey. What I'm going to take note of is the productivity and what we saw in that San Francisco offense after he joined. They went from the bottom of the league in yards per game, points per game, expected points. I mean, every number went up, and also they won a ton of games, right? And even in the weeks where he wasn't like the only back running, he was still pretty damn productive, especially down the stretch when it mattered most. Your confidence level in him. We'll throw the injury portion out the window. You can work it back in if you want, but just as the baseline here, a healthy Christian McCaffrey, no reason to believe there's any any fall off for him, right?
Yeah, I'm closer to your side of the spectrum in terms of a lingering injury concern, right? And I think he answered that question last year, right? He came back, he played a full 17 games, so these things can happen to anyone, but I don't think that he's any more prone to being injured than anybody else. And a full season of Christian McCaffrey in this offense is the stuff that dreams are made of, right? For the longest time, the book on Christian McCaffrey was he was the entirety of the Panthers offense. And if he was ever in a more functioning offense or a higher functioning offense, maybe we'd see some fall off. And it was anything but, right? He was averaging about 21 points per game as a Panther last year, came in and he averaged about 21 points per game as a 49er. And categorically, the upside of this offense is significantly higher than anything he's ever experienced with during his time in Carolina. So, it's hard to average 21 points per game in the National Football League. So I don't know if there's a ton of upside there, but ultimately he's one of the safest players, and his floor is very, very close to most of the rest of the field's ceiling.
Yes, that leverage over the field thing, you're going to hear that a lot on these live streams. We're looking for players who are going to be, just like in daily fantasy, you need the player who scores you the most points in any given game. You need the same thing in weekly and in all forms of fantasy, best ball as well. And he was about about 5 points ahead of the field last year. That's pretty good. Just say greetings to the people out there showing up. Dame, Mr. Scampers, Jay, thanks for coming. Matthew, appreciate you. Royal, JR, appreciate everyone who's here. And if you have any comments, jump in. We'll answer your questions as we go along. So that brings us up to the next wide receiver, where I think, we start getting into players where it's almost like, I'm fine with all of them, but, I can see some wiggle room. Jamar Chase, I thought down the season they found the secret sauce. Secret sauce was not the deep routes. It was running them intermediate. Teams were trying to shut down the deep routes. It looks like all the pieces in the passing attack are going to be there with the addition of Irv Smith Jr. Pretty comfortable with Chase playing with Joe Burrow for another season. I think there's no reason not to, right?
Yeah, very, very comfortable with him putting up similar production, right? He did miss some time last year, only played 12 games, but 20.2 points per game is very, very solid productivity and well represented on his range this year. And it's another year in this system with Joe Burrow, right? So I think the upside is, still very much so there, because with his injuries, with Burrow's injuries, their playing time together at the NFL has been limited a little bit. So I do think that he does have a bit more ceiling, but also I think we're going to continue to see them find ways to work him into this offense in unique and creative ways. And that also offers some upside for Chase's picture. So he's the third off the board for me as well.
Yeah, I'll say this for, just an impression of the Bengals over the last couple of years. They've made some really good adjustments over the course, not just within games, but within the course of the season to change the way they're using players. And, it's worked with the rushing game and the passing game both. So we'll see what goes on with that rushing game. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Austin Eckler and Travis Kelce and Cooper Kupp round out that top six. I think I'm going to have a share of all those guys. You give me 6 first overall picks, I will probably have one of all those guys. I'm especially keen on Kupp. Which of these guys worries you the most?
It might be recency bias, but it's probably Austin Eckler, right? He's done nothing but produce for this team thus far, but to be as candid and transparent with how unhappy he is with his stand, the Chargers have handled this this renegotiation window that is now closed. I'm surprised if we're heading towards a world where he maybe holds out for a period of time. He's obviously requested the trade. If he's not a Charger, there's question marks about his workload. But also it feels like over the course of the last few years, the Chargers have really been working to build or sort of shift their offense towards Justin Herbert and away from Austin Eckler. So I do think that as a 28-year-old running back, we've probably already seen his peak performance, and that's very much so what you're paying for at his current ADP.
Right, and just for a little general conversation, I get it. We all love our running backs from a fantasy perspective. Clearly, the NFL is viewing them differently, and Eckler right now is making about what the high-end guys in free agency made this year, Miles Sanders, 6.3 million a year average. I think Eckler's a little above that. Do you think we're going to see a lot of unhappy running backs over the course of time, and what kind of impact do you think that might have on the game, or will it mean more of a stream of younger, fresher players?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of the more dynamic positions in terms of how the NFL has approached it over the last few years. You think about it, Austin Eckler is going to be 28 years old when we kick off the season this year, and you look around the league, the list of running backs that have or are scheduled to make more money than Austin Eckler this year that are also of his age. Teams are kind of trying to get out from under those contracts, right? Joe Mixon, right. Dalvin Cook, right? Like the list goes on and on. I think the days of a running back of his age getting north of 10 million are very likely gone, right? I think we can probably look at Tony Pollard as a more reasonable model for how the NFL is going to treat this position going forward, right? Get someone with a late-ish round capital, run him into the ground. If he performs well, tag him. If he performs well again, tag him, and then send him off to pasture, right? Yep. And ultimately, if this becomes a trend, I wouldn't be surprised to see it addressed in the latest CBA coming a few years down the road, right? To where maybe there's a different rookie wage scale for the running back position as opposed to others. But whether or not that could get done is a very open question. But ultimately, I think we're going to see the NFL just to continue to churn through these guys until about age 26. And that big second contract is probably going to be a thing of the past for running backs.
Yeah, I keep saying, watch where the NFL is investing its capital. It's making it clear what direction they're going. And just, I'll throw out a list of names here because I do think it's kind of interesting. And maybe this has been something the league has just been ignoring, but for fantasy managers, we can go back in the last 25 years. Let's go back to 1999. Olandis Gary comes out of nowhere for the Denver Broncos. Mike Anderson comes out of nowhere in 2000 and 2005 for the Broncos. Dominic Davis, who turned into Dominic Williams in 2003 for the Houston Texans. Nick Goings in Carolina in 2004. Steve Slayton, 2008. Peyton Hillis, 2010 for Cleveland. Arian Foster, another Texan in 2010. Justin Forsett, C.J. Anderson, David Johnson, Alex Collins, Elijah Mitchell in 2021, James Conner in 2021, Leonard Fournette, Cordero Patterson, Devin Singletary for the Bills in 2021. These players that all kind of come out of nowhere. Jerick McKinnon this past season come down the stretch. Cam Akers, Rashad Penny. We've seen it in recent years. It's just, if the right guy is in the right place at the right time, he's going to get something done. I feel like the NFL's caught on to this. It's going to make our job as fantasy managers a little more different, but it's also going to make it a little more interesting when we're investing in these late round running backs. And I think there's a ton of them we'll discuss in this draft. Joe Haber in the chat throws out like Elijah Mitchell, the RB2 with the most upside. He's an RB2 with a ton of upside. I don't know if he has the most, but that's a player that I see in a fair number of my best ball drafts. Where are you at on him?
Yeah, as you were going through this list, I was saying to myself, every undrafted free agent running back that has ever been in a Shanahan system, right? Like,
right.
The upside is there if you buy into an injury narrative for CMC, right? Like he should get some workload given the investment that San Francisco has made in Christian McCaffrey, both from a contract and from a trade standpoint. I doubt that he's going to cede very many carries to an Eli Mitchell, but he's going to be on the field and he's a very capable next man up if that bell were to ever toll.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Just diving back into the other half of that first round, the other 6 into the top 12. Jonathan Taylor at number 7, Hill at 8, Adams at 9, Diggs at 10, Barkley at 11, CeeDee Lamb at 12. I've seen Barkley dropping a little bit. I'm not sure why. Where are you at on Jonathan Taylor? I feel like maybe I'm missing the boat on him. I've kind of downgraded him maybe more than I should based on last year. He was the number 1 pick, a consensus number 1 pick overall last year. Is this offense going to improve? Will the offensive line live up to its reputation? What do you expect, Derek?
Yeah, he's kind of an enigma, right? I'm your end of the spectrum in terms of how I view him relative to the market, I'm a little bit lower on him. For me, with Shane Steichen coming in, with presumably not only a new but a young quarterback under center for the Colts coming up, like there's a lot of uncertainty swirling around Jonathan Taylor, right? If we were able to confidently project him for a workload akin to what he saw 2 years ago or what we were projecting him for last season, then yeah, I think he's probably a little bit of a value. But I mean, as you stack up all of these unknowns into his circumstance, you're depending on a lot of things breaking in the right direction for Jonathan Taylor to pay off this ADP, and I'm not sure if that's a bet that I want to make.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I find like different lanes, and I think that's the thing about any draft, right? I mean, if you don't like a player, there's plenty of talent all around him, plenty of lanes to drive down that don't necessarily include the guy.
Why we draft 100 teams every offseason, right?
This is true. So I have all those guys, and some that I don't want, some that I do want. You're taking all your chances. But I mean, if you're in a single draft, I mean, that's one of the things, about fantasy. We all know it's a subjective thing. If you have concerns about player, there are other players who are going to be productive. I just read off a list of guys that probably nobody drafted in their various leagues who ended up winning them leagues. So there's always hope for us in general. Is there hope for some of these players, though? I want to just check your, I guess, not confidence level, but comfort level. I see like some value, and I just see some interesting prices. Some that I think are low, some that I think are high. I want to get your impression of Derrick Henry, who I think has kind of dropped down. I've seen him going as late as the last quarter of the second round is where I'm starting to see him fall to in some, not all. Sometimes he goes in the first round towards the end of that. I'm still fine with him there. But where are you at on Derrick Henry with the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, I think Henry represents an interesting value overall, right? Seemingly this is going to be his last year or close to his last year in Tennessee. So, the organization has all the incentive in the world to run him into the ground. And, there was a stint last year where it looked like Derrick Henry was finally stepping into a bit more of a pass catching role, right? Relative to his almost non-existent status in that category previously. Like, he went out and he caught 33 passes. That was a career high for him, right? So, he's obviously going to have some of the best touchdown upside on the board at the position. If he's going to go out and, push for, even 2 or 3 catches a game, and he's going to be running to the ground. I mean, if you can get, Tractor Cito for, a early to mid second round pick, I think that he has some of the best potential for return in terms of the capital you invested to acquire him.
Dave Overboard betting Henry could stiff arm a guy off the planet. I would agree with that. Would not want to be on the other end of that. A lot of business decisions that he forces, which I think works to his advantage, especially those fourth quarter defensive back decisions. Brian Larkin, Taylor was a bust even before his injury. He will not be my RB1 this year. Matthew Whitfield, can't trust Taylor until we know who the quarterback is. I think those are reasonable takes for all these guys. But for me, Henry, I'm still all in. I mean, when I feel like I get either a Devontae Adams at the end of the first round and follow that up with a Henry, or I get a Henry at the end of the first round, I follow that up with one of the high-end wide receivers, I feel like I'm off to a solid start. We'll see. I mean, I'm still chasing volume or anticipated volume for me with Henry. That's there. Breece Hall, I mentioned him at the top of this live stream in case anybody missed it. The reporting out of New York is the Jets expect him to be ready for the start of the season, ready for week 1. That probably means a training camp spent on PUP and then ready week 1. How ready? I don't know. I'm maybe putting too much concern into the little recency bias here for me. The J.K. Dobbins investments I made last year that kind of got off to a slow start. And Gus Edwards. I mean, both of those guys hurt like the last week of August and first week of September, respectively. Weren't quite themselves until well into the season. I think for the most part, we do expect guys to rebound from these nicely. I feel like it's just that Breece Hall was so damn good, we don't care.
I mean, that's one way to put it, right? In points per game, he was, easily a top 10 running back last year. The injury took place at a season where it's not unreasonable for him to be, not only back, but, fairly effective. Sure. in the very early parts of the season. Obviously, well, I guess not obviously because nothing is official with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, but presumably this is going to be an offense on the upswing, right? So what he might trade off in some volume and some workload will probably be more than made up for in terms of his touchdown upside. Really with me for Breece Hall, it's all about price. I'm seeing him in some cases creep into the end of the first round. I've seen him, fall into the beginning of the third round, right? So, he's another player that as we're kind of getting up on that 2-3 turn, if he's there, I'm hoping that that the room can't read me, that I'm hoping that he falls because I'm definitely snatching him up at that kind of late second, early third price.
Yeah, how do you feel about grabbing Michael Carter late if you grab Hall early, or just grabbing Michael Hall late in best balls, just saying, hey, maybe I get a little early run, especially if you're maybe drafting a running back that you don't feel great about early in the season?
Yeah, more so I'm aligned with the latter, right? Handcuffing in my mind is a bit more of a redraft principle. If you lose Breece Hall, you're going to have a ton of guys on your roster that you don't have to figure out who is going to score the touchdown that week, right? So, less of a premium on the handcuff than I would put, if I was drafting Breece Hall in redraft. And to that point, Michael Carter is definitely someone that's worth speculating in the late rounds, right? The biggest predictor of future injury is recent injury, right? He's coming off of a not insignificant knee injury, right? Like, yes, we've gotten better at repairing that damage, but there is a likelihood that he re-aggravates it, that he overcompensates with a different part of his body, that he's just not fully up to speed. Any of those outcomes play out, and you have Michael Carter sitting there for pennies on the dollar as the de facto workhorse running back in New York.
Yeah, the compensatory issues are always a big deal. We see players deal with that throughout. By the way, Michael Carter currently running back, I want to say 57 on best ball, I think, in best ball 10s anyway. That's pretty good value right there. I think I think he's probably a heavily owned player for me right now for that reason. Beyond that, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy I have a lot of confidence in. Am I overstating the case? I mean, Jameson Williams is going to be there. I don't, Marvin Jones signed. I'm not really worried about that. New running back. I don't know that means they're going to change the trajectory of how they work this offense. I'm kind of all in on Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'll go early in the second round. Where are you at on him?
I like Amon-Ra St. Brown more as my wide receiver too. So based on his ADP, if I'm going wide receiver to open my best ball drafts, he fits in beautifully, right? For me, a wide receiver one, you really need to have that, that slate breaking upside. And, while he's flashed that, here or there for a game, I think a lot of that is going to be capped as Jameson Williams is introduced and gets integrated into this offense. I mean, we saw it last year with Jameson Williams where he ran 3 routes and one of them was an 80-yard touchdown, right? Like, if that role expands even incrementally, which by all accounts it should, then, that is all ceiling that is taken away from Amon-Ra St. Brown. So it's kind of a weird position for me. I like him at value, but specifically when I've already drafted a wide receiver in the first round.
And that's exactly what I'm doing. I should stipulate that grabbing him in the second round is usually has been as my second receiver. Got a lot of like Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams paired up with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I also feel like he's kind of a rising Keenan Allen. And by the way, Keenan Allen is probably still that guy at a much cheaper rate, right?
Every year.
I think we're,
every single
year. Every year. But he's that guy when you, like, if you grab a Tyreek Hill first, a volatile player, a guy who may not show up every week, and you want that leavening agent, if you will, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown has that feel for me, kind of similar to Keenan Allen.
That's the absolute same way that I've been deploying him as well, specifically with those players. I find myself with a ton of Hill and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
All right, that makes perfect sense then. So, Nick Chubb, I know Matthew Berry put out a piece earlier this year suggesting the Browns are going to throw the ball a hell of a lot more. this makes sense because they're paying a hell of a lot of money to throw the ball. Nick Chubb has been really good, though, but we saw games last year where he kind of disappeared. I know he got a little beat up at some point. But current ADP, I mean, he's a reasonable price. Do you feel like this is about to come, like the gravy train's about to end, or do you think you can get another really good year out of him?
So I don't mind Nick Chubb as much in best ball, right? Because the story, the book on Nick Chubb for his career is, kind of like a Derrick Henry light. His lack of involvement in the passing game, you're basically looking at touchdown or bust. Fortunately, in best ball, when he gets those touchdowns, he will be inserted into your lineup and he will be a very good option for you. So really the question that we're asking is the frequency at which those touchdowns will come. And I tend to agree with Barry, right? Like you talked about it as we were talking about the state of running backs in general. Not for nothing, Nick Chubb is another 27, 28-year-old running back that is probably not going to be making as much money as he is right now for long. But you follow the money in the NFL. You follow what these front offices are doing. The Browns are very heavily invested in making their passing attack work, right? So, yes, we're finally freed of Kareem Hunt in that backfield, but I do think that touchdown upside is even further limited as this offense swings towards the passing game. So, if you can get him late enough to where he's your running back 2, maybe even your running back 3, I don't mind it because you're automatically going to get those touchdown weeks. But from a redraft perspective, he's someone that I am outright avoiding.
Finding myself a little bit wondering if Kareem Hunt's requirements in terms of pay might not be quite in line with what the market is. And look, yeah. I laugh about it. It's easy for me to laugh about because I'm not out there getting mad at the millions I'm not making. But I mean, that's a lot on the line, right? So totally understandable. Sure. So a couple backs we touched on, or we have touched on, that I'm not feeling sure about, but the value is that we'll just throw them out there: Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon, both of whom I have recently drafted in 6th and 7th rounds. I mean, there comes a point, and by the way, I see your questions coming in, and I'll get to those in a second here. And if you have them, keep throwing the questions in. Also go to the community tab, check out the poll. We'd like to hear your take on all that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do all the YouTube-y things. And enjoy the greatness that is Eric Romoff, in case you just tuned in and are wondering who this fine individual is. That's who. So the Mixon and Cook thing, I mean, we know what the situations are. There's a great deal of uncertainty about their futures with their current clubs. How do you feel about them? Are they values at the right price, or you just want to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone's got a price, right? You mentioned seeing them in the 5th or 6th round, and that sounds about right for both of them, right? The thing that I think sort of differentiates these two overall is we're probably going to have a pretty clear answer on Joe Mixon in the weeks to come, right? Like there is a likelihood that he could end up being cut, right? So if he's not on this roster, then obviously it introduces a bunch of turmoil to his perspective overall. I do think that if he is on this roster, there's a decent likelihood that we're going to see most of what we've come to know Joe Mixon to be. Dalvin Cook is a little bit murkier, right? Specifically looking at how the Vikings have moved through the offseason thus far and Alexander Madison's decision to stay with Minnesota, right? Like he, as a 24, 25-year-old running back, could have gone out and arguably gotten an incrementally larger contract, potentially a larger role somewhere else, but he decided to come back to Minnesota. And I think that might indicate that there could be, kind of a changing of the guard in terms of the pecking order in this running back room. At least, maybe this is the year where it inches closer to an even split. And maybe next year is the year where Madison, overtakes the workload split. So, these are both, kind of treacherous positions overall, right, with Mixon and with Cook. But, ultimately, I mean, if you're going to get them in the 6th round, like if they're on the field, they still carry a ton of upside. And again, in best ball, you don't have to figure out when that week is, right? Whenever it happens, you're gonna bear that fruit.
In case people have been following along, Kevin Seifert had a piece at ESPN, I want to say last week or something, but basically he just said everything the Vikings have done is been the actions of a team that plans on not having Dalvin Cook on its roster. And we all thought, we sat in this live stream 2 weeks ago, waiting for them not to pay his bonus as the deadline approaches. I happened to be live streaming at that time, and they did pay it. And you're going, oh, wow. So they're going to stick him around. But I think, what Seifert points to is the money they gave him, 2 years fully guaranteed for Madison. Fully guaranteed $6.35 million. That includes the $2.75 million in 2024, making the only player the Vikings have signed this spring to get full guarantees in the second year. I mean, and he's, as you mentioned, a much younger player. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Seifert's takeaway was Dalvin Cook either takes a pay cut or he's not a Viking. And so we'll find that out. But, I mean, not being a Viking might not be the worst thing that happens to him either. There are going to be opportunities that arise. A couple other guys, just check your comfort level on. Aaron Jones, right? We don't know what this Green Bay offense is going to look like exactly. We're pretty sure there will not be an Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon coming off a year that was probably a disappointment to me. I invested in him pretty heavily, but I don't think it's because he can't play. I think the way the season went just kind of precluded them from doing some of the things that maybe Matt LaFleur wanted to. Maybe he's in a better spot, but Aaron Jones getting older. Where are you at on him? He's going pretty high in ADP still, but not as high as he was last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Aaron Jones has done might become pretty close to the model for what running backs try to accomplish in the NFL in the years to come, right? They just restructured his deal to where it's a cool $10 or $11 million this year, and he's very likely out the door next year. So anytime that's the case with a running back, we saw it with Josh Jacobs last year. We tend to see these coaches in front offices really run those guys into the ground. And all of the question marks around Aaron Jones that are present this year have largely been in place for him in years past. Like, yes, we have to wonder, how effective this offense will be overall. But Aaron Jones is steadily turning in, running back 9, running back 11 finishes in terms of points per game. And he's not a prolific touchdown scorer. So if the offense slows down a little bit, that doesn't hurt him as much as it would for other players. And I think that we're looking at a position where he's going to see a ton of workload in what I presume will be his last year in Green Bay. So to get him in, I'm seeing him in the mid 50s in terms of ADP right now for a guy that is 18. Consistently, he's top 9, top 12, 2 back-to-back top 11 seasons or 11 finishes in points per game. I mean, he screams value. I am dangerously overexposed to Aaron Jones so far this offseason.
So I feel like I'm heading that direction with Cam Akers, who I thought was brilliant down the stretch once he got his issues with the club sorted out, or the club got their issues with him sorted out, however you want to view that. Running behind a horrible offensive line, right? I mean, and without the threat of a really effective downfield passing attack, Akers really racked up some numbers down the stretch last year. He's running back 20 right now. Just throwing out some of the players going ahead of him. Hell, DeAndre Swift is among them. How do you feel about Akers at that price? I kind of like it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, right? Like, I mean, look, for all of the pontificating we want to do, volume is king in this sport, specifically at this position. And I think we're probably heading into a year where he's going to set career highs in terms of rush attempts and potentially for receptions, right? Those aren't, astronomically high bars for him to clear, based on his young career. But, I do think that he is going to be the lead option in this offense, or at least in this backfield. And the price is right. You're getting a guy, around that kind of 6th round territory that, is very likely to lead his offense or his team in rushing yards, in rushing attempts, certainly in rushing touchdowns. Whether or not he gets back up to 7 touchdowns, that's right around where I have him projected. So, we will probably see more passing scores for the Rams than we will for rushing scores. But I mean, he's kind of all alone back there, and at that price, you got to jump all over it.
A few comments here. Mr. Scampers is going to let one of his lives be burned on Dillon again. He will let Dillon hurt him. I will too. I'm drafting A.J. Dillon. He's been dirt cheap. Minnesota should trade up to take Bijan Robinson, whatever the cost. And Brian Larkin says, which I believe the fans of every single team are saying. I mean, I hear Fabiano doing it with the Cowboys. I see Eagles fans doing. I mean, pretty much everyone. We do this as fantasy managers too. We want to project these high-end rookies to the best possible destinations, and it almost never works out that way, people. I'll just remind you. Brian Larkin has a question, and Joe Abear makes the point I made. Madison wasn't paid like a backup. That is true. Running back question for New Orleans. If Kamara is cleared to play, which seems like a reach to me at this moment, but let's pretend it can happen, would you want him or Jamal Williams?
I mean, I guess in a vacuum, if he's playing all 16 or all 17 games, I would err on the side of Alvin Kamara. I think from a draft value consideration, I mean, it's very unlikely that we see Alvin Kamara play a full complement of games this year. And, all told, Jamal Williams might end up being the better value, right? I mean, he certainly has shown to do that as recently as last year, given the opportunity, especially if we know the potential suspension situation for Kamara heading into the season. If Jamal comes in and shows to be shades of himself last year very early in the season, we could easily be at a point where they're evenly splitting work or worse for Alvin Kamara. By the time that AK is returning.
I saw someone was running back visits. Who was visiting the Saints? Kendre Miller is visiting the Saints this week. Somebody else was too. And by the way, while we're at that, Roshan Johnson will be visiting the Buccaneers today, or was visiting. He has 8 visits scheduled. So these rookies, we're going to get to them as well. I don't think Kamara is gonna make it, and we'll see. I mean, I like Jamal Williams is at his current price. He's once again, double-digit rounds. I'm fine with that. Take my chances with him. Not expecting 17 touchdowns. I still might get him. Probably not. Mark Spafford, do you see Daniel Jones taking another step forward, and will he rush enough to be a top 8 quarterback? Eric Romoff, the question is posed to you, sir.
I do see him taking a step forward. Top 8, I guess that sounds about right. If you go back and look at last year, Daniel Jones was among the league leaders in terms of designed rushing plays. So, I don't see them, fully diverting from that course. And, while they haven't made a ton of splashy moves thus far this offseason, securing a guy like Darren Waller certainly brings a ton of touchdown upside to Daniel Jones relative to the targets he was throwing the ball to last year, who largely outperformed their expectation and are, in many cases still in place. So, I do think that incrementally we've seen this Giants passing offense take some steps in the right direction. As long as he's still getting those rushes, I think top 7 or top 8 is in range for him.
Yeah, I think the rushing equity is there. Like, he's been a better runner than everyone realizes, and everyone realizes he's a pretty good runner. But go back and look at the week-to-week stats on him. It's been really impressive. Even when he trips and falls down short of the goal line, he ends up with pretty good totals. So he needs to work on that. The
after a long run,
right? But look, I mean, I'm putting a lot of faith in Brian Dable, which I did going into last season. I felt like, if we thought, again, it was a Joe Judge offense, right? So it was going to get better. It got betterer than I expected. I mean, honestly, I felt like it was going to be it was a low bar, so there was going to be improvement. We were going to be impressed, but it was even more impressive than I expected. So I do like him. I don't know if top 8 maybe is a little bit high. Maybe we're talking about close to a ceiling there, but I do like him an awful lot. We'll need more offensive improvement there to get there. I think I caught up with all the questions there. So one other guy, we were talking about the Saints, Chris Olave. I feel like people are viewing him as as an established threat at his position. I think that's fair. We don't know where Michael Thomas is at, although it sounds like everyone's optimistic again. And remember, early last season, before the toe imploded, he was playing pretty well. But what is Chris Olave to you?
Yeah, what's old is new again in terms of optimism for Michael Thomas heading into the camp season. I love what Chris Olave did as a rookie last year. I love how he profiles in this offense with a considerable upgrade at quarterback with Derek Carr coming in. So for me, I see him sitting kind of the mid 30s in ADP. Love getting him as an upside wide receiver too. Even if Michael Thomas does return and is back on the field, I think we can still project pretty confidently a fairly similar output from Olave last season, or from Olave's season last year to this year. And the upside is tremendous if if the injury bug bites again, or if the off the field issues or disgruntled status with the head coach rears its ugly head with Michael Thomas, you're now looking at a guy that easily has kind of back end wide receiver one upside.
Just in a related note, because I might be personally invested in this one. When is too early to take Rasheed Shahid? Is it the 4th round? Okay, I'm not going that early. But what are you doing with Rasheed? I mean, I think as a free square play, look, he's running back 76. I'm out there in the same universe with the Robert Woodses, Paris Campbells, a handful of rookies, Miko Hardman. I mean, of the group he's in, I kind of like him a little more, but it's a really narrow bit of evidence that I'm working on, right?
I mean, it sounds like I'm more bullish on Rasheed Shahid than even you might be. To be fair, I haven't taken him in the 4th round yet, so maybe not. But you look at him, you look at some of his his per game or his per reception rates, among rookie wide receivers, led the league in yards per reception, right? As I was laying out my case for why I am bearish on Michael Thomas, playing a full complement of games next year, that coming to pass means good things for Rasheed Shahid, who also got that quarterback upgrade, right? So, I mean, to get him in the near 200s of ADP, I mean, I'm grabbing him probably 3 rounds earlier than that, and I am already overexposed to him. So
yeah, he's
love
on 30%
him as a
roster.
late dart throw.
Got him on 30% of my rosters, just checking best ball 10. So I'll get to that point. I am not overweight yet, but I will be working on that further. I think we all have our little favorites. Just anybody else that's kind of your favorite in those, in that regard, any guys that you find yourself gravitating towards that's maybe off the beaten path?
I don't know how off the beaten path this is necessarily, but I do think that Rashad White is a screaming value. He's right around 80 in his ADP overall. Realistically, I think it's fair to project his floor to be pretty close to what Leonard Fournette did last year, right? And that assumes that somebody else is there splitting carries with him, and Leonard Fournette finished as kind of a fringe running back 1, right? High running back 2. So that is the absolute bare minimum contribution that I expect to see from Rashad White. So to get that as at ADP 77 overall is value that I've been attacking all off season.
I'm with you there. I feel like people have kind of dialed back. We keep expecting the other shoe to drop, and we keep hearing Ezekiel Elliott's name thrown out there. I mentioned some of the guys visiting there, like they seem they're not done. But Todd Bowles said this week they need him to step up and be an every down back. So we'll find that out. Mr. Scampers is in with you and I on Shahid all day. Send me cold to the rock formerly known as Pluto. Joe Bear wants to know, Calvin Ridley, a mystery box, or should we expect him to be Trevor's main man? Trevor addressed that this very week and suggested that yes, Calvin Ridley could be his main man. I think you're going to have to draft him as if he is.
Yeah, his market is certainly going to dictate as such, and I think it's a reasonable expectation, right? Like, who else in that wide receiver room is going to surpass him, right? Like, Christian Kirk had a fantastic season, relative to the amount of money they paid him, relative to his expectations. But, they can only get so much out of a slot type receiver. And I think introducing that more traditional receiver into this offense is just going to, shoot this Jaguars team to the moon. So I am very bullish on Ridley. You definitely will have to pay that type of price tag for him, but I think he's got a good shot of paying it off.
I would totally agree with that. And I think, this is an offense on the rise to me. I want a piece of these ascending offenses. I might wait and get the cheaper piece but right now, I mean, Calvin Ridley is a low end wide receiver too. It doesn't seem like a huge gamble. Let's hit a couple of these quick and see if we get any more questions, Eric. Players in new homes. I think there's 2 running backs that are fairly comparable, and both ended up in decent spots. I think maybe you disagree with that. David Montgomery in Detroit and Miles Sanders in Carolina. How do you feel about those 2?
David Montgomery, or really any other capable running back landing in Detroit, just hurts my heart as a DeAndre Swift manager in far too many spaces than I would like to admit. But nonetheless, he's there. I mean, he should project to have a pretty similar role to what Williams had there last season. I don't think he'll end up in the end zone 17 times, but he's going to be a significant part of it,
right? I mean, that's that doesn't seem out of line, right?
That feels about right. So ultimately, I think we see a world where his upside is capped a little bit, right? If he finds the end zone 17 times, then obviously he's going to be fantastic value. But I think he's going to be a serviceable option who will pop and end up in your starting best ball when he does make his way into the box. Miles Sanders feels like he fell into a pretty solid situation overall, right? Like we'll see what offense becomes as they draft a rookie with the first overall pick, presumably. But the Carolina Panthers were a very run-heavy team last season. I'm assuming that a lot of that ethos is largely going to remain in place as the rookie gets up to the NFL speed. But ultimately, Sanders is a guy that got up over 1,000 all-purpose yards. He still shows a lot of wiggle and a lot of burst. So if he's going to get a lot of volume and not have to split that 5 ways as we've grown accustomed to during his tenure in Philadelphia, I think that he could be set up for a good 1 to 2 year run here with the Panthers.
Mr. Scampers would like us to remember that Zay Jones still has a job, people. Sometimes I like investing in the cheapest piece of these things. I might go with the middle piece here if I have an opportunity, Kirk. But he's right. I just was doing a write-up on the Jaguars that I'm going to post here a little bit on the Football Diehards website. A place you should go. They have football stuff there, and you should check it out. Get the early bird discount, 15% off if you use the promo code Diehards. But yeah, Zay Jones should not be forgotten. Keeper question: Chris Olave or Jamal Williams? Brian Larkin wants to know. I'm going to say, Dynasty, it would be an easy answer, right? It's Olave. It's maybe a little more complicated in a keeper league, and it might depend more on some of your associated pieces, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming the only reason why that is a question is that it's not to do with Dynasty, and there's probably a round valuation associated with that. So if you can get Jamal Williams essentially for free, one of your last 2 or 3 round picks, maybe it's worth it. But I mean, Chris Olave is probably someone that you didn't spend super high draft capital on to acquire last year, and he is a much younger player at a position that has a longer shelf life. So you're probably keeping Williams even at value for 1 more year tops. Whereas Olave is someone that, I mean, if he continues to progress on this trajectory, is a player you might be able to keep for 3-4 seasons. So if nothing else, that has me lean towards Olave.
I think that's the point, is how long you're keeping and what your needs are in the immediate short term. I think, Williams might give you a little something this year, but beyond that, I don't know that you're going to be that happy about it. Just a couple of quickies here. Rookie strategies for you. I mean, Bijan Robinson, I'm seeing going almost, I don't see him leaving the second round much, right? Seeing a lot more rookies going, and maybe I'm best ball drafting more earlier this year, so maybe this was the case last year as well, and I just didn't see it because I didn't do it enough. But seeing a lot of rookies drafted, what's your approach with rookies in these early best balls?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I think that rookies are kind of the cheat code in best ball, right? Everything in moderation. You can't overexpose yourself to rookies because, especially as we sit here in the first week of April, we don't know what team they will be on or their true set of circumstances. But, for assuming that risk, you're also getting exposure to guys that can very much so pop and finish as, wide receiver ones or running back ones, right? So, generally speaking, the earlier in the offseason, the further down the list we see these rookies fall in terms of their ADP. And, basically once I've gotten to a point where I've got, a starting lineup that I'm comfortable with and a reserve in each of the skill positions, I'm almost exclusively firing at rookies, knowing that, if it takes them a little time to ramp up, if they fall into the right situation, I mean, you can get tremendous return on that investment for assuming that risk, right? So it doesn't feel great when you look at your team when it's all said and done and you have a bunch of guys that you don't know what roster they are going to be on. But ultimately, I mean, you're exclusively shooting for upside in best ball. So that is the best way to get exposure to that upside for a relatively menial cost.
Right, and I think right now, the prices are obviously going to change as soon as we put helmets on these guys, and the values you got or didn't get are going to entirely be reversed or totally out the window once the draft happens. But that's part of the fun of drafting right now. Another part of the fun of drafting right now is not knowing the outcomes of looming issues and some of those. Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers. Just we'll finish it up with this. As you sit now, percentage-wise, Aaron Rodgers as a Jet and Lamar Jackson as a Raven. Where are you at percentage-wise on those guys?
Ooh, I was more prepared to just ramble about these two circumstances. As a percentage, I would say 65% that Aaron Rodgers is a New York Jet. I would say probably 35% that we see Lamar Jackson return to Baltimore.
Yeah, I'm probably a little higher on both of those, and we'll get into it next time. I mean, I think there are going to be all kinds of issues with the associated pieces to these guys, right? Mostly with the Jets that we'll have to look at, but also with the Packers, where we don't know what we're getting with Jordan Love, but by golly, I'm willing to buy it because it's cheap.
I just moved that percentage down in my brain for Lamar Jackson based on the news that Anthony Richardson just did a visit with the Indianapolis Colts, who have been, with the Baltimore Ravens, I should say, who have been tied to, or at least rumored to be in conversation with the Colts for that fourth pick, right? So seems like they are starting to position themselves for backup plans, if not, full-on succession planning.
I had a thought today was when I was on Fantasy Dirt. And by the way, I'll be on Fantasy Dirt again tomorrow and Friday with Michael Fabiano. Football Diehards will be on Saturday night, 7 p.m. usual time. I'll be here Saturday with a live stream with Matt Waldman as well. So we'll talk rookies again, and one of the best out there. Go hit the poll on our community page. But I kind of threw out an idea, Eric, that, let's say the Ravens or the Colts have a guy that they're really interested in, and they're pretty sure they're going to get one of their top choices at 4. But what if a quarterback needy team jumps ahead of them to 3? Do they maybe then shift and maybe throw their eggs or wait till the pick is in and find out their guy's gone and then maybe make a move for a Lamar Jackson type move or something?
I mean, they could, right? I think the thing is that at that point, if someone has jumped 2-3, there's a decent likelihood that whoever the Ravens might be looking for has come off the board, right? Unless they're in love with Will Levis, 3 picks into this draft, the quarterback they covet is very likely to be gone, they being Baltimore, right? So I think that it would behoove the Colts to try to make that move sooner rather than later if they're entertaining it. And as much as it burns me as a Texans fan and an AFC South purveyor, I mean, you put Lamar Jackson on that team and they are very much so a contender immediately, right? So it would be a very quick turnaround for this organization and a Baltimore team that seems to be willing to deal, right? I don't think they'd have to pay through the nose to get that done.
Right. I think we've seen teams in recent years come to the point where, whether it was Tyreek Hill or A.J. Brown, I mean, get it all together different position, but, the teams that had them just didn't feel like the cost was worth it and they could cobble something else together. Maybe we hit that point with the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. They've been trying to get a deal done with him. It'll all play out. A couple comments there. Ramondre Stevenson is a guy. I talked to Michael Fabiano about him today. Fabs is all in, has him inside his, I want to say number 12. He's currently, his ADP is 13. I feel like I'm not comfortable with this, and I probably should be. Do you have pretty good confidence in Ramondre Stevenson?
Not that price. For me, seeing Ramondre Stevenson really emerge as the lead back in this offense has been sort of the exception and not the rule, right? So I would be not surprised at all if we roll the ball forward to this fall and we are seeing a multi-headed backfield in New England, as we've seen for most of Bill Belichick's tenure in New England, right? So that risk is always going to be looming over Stevenson or any Patriots running back's head over for me. So to take him as, a borderline RB1 feels a little uncomfortable.
Right. And some comments in here, Royal Slade. Yes, he's Ramondre's a bell cow until they draft Bijan. And that's been rumored as well. So no shortage of rumors out there. And no shortage of fun. We'll continue doing our best ball drafts. You can find Eric Romoff often on the Football Diehards radio program. You can find him on Twitter at FantasyNav. I recommend you do that and follow him. And you'll find his work at Football Diehards and in Football Diehards magazines soon to come. We'll have more conversations about that as we get near. So thanks, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it. Go to the poll, the community tab on our YouTube page. By the way, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm told it's fantastic. I've done great for you. And hit the like button and do all the things the algorithm loves. We appreciate you very much. Be back here Saturday with Matt Waldman. Be on the Fantasy channel tomorrow, 2 to 4, tomorrow and Friday. It sounds like I'm just hearing from our producers on that show. More best ball talk. What could be better? I'm Bob Harris. He's Eric Romoff. We are calling it a night. We'll see you next time.